having a strong opinion, but holding it loosely was critical for me, for the companies that I was working with. Good strategy for life personally, but certainly in business, like have a point of view and be open to the fact that there's lots of information that we don't have. I operate very much from a like, what's the task to do? Just go get it done. And I think one of my learnings was people and personalities are vastly different. And the way that people are motivated, the things that get in their way are plentiful, and that it is really important to treat every human differently.
Amos, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Let's start from the top. I mean, there's so much that we can talk about, and I'm sure we're going to go all over the place because that's what I'll do with this conversation, I'm sure. But let's start from the top and tell me about right now. You're doing a lot of coaching with CEOs, founders, startup growth teams. Tell me a little bit about that.
When I left Techstars, I was thinking about what are the things that I get the most joy out of, and where I also felt like I was able to provide the most value. And so I'm going to accidentally cover a whole bunch of stuff right now. So I thought about it, and I like one-to-one work, or one to a small group a lot. I wrote a couple of books, and one of them particularly called Levers, and the content of that book are the things that I think are both most important to every business focusing on, and also in the area where I feel like I have a lot of expertise. And so the coaching that I do now is largely around all of that. Inherently, that's what every company needs, regardless of stage. It's where we spend the time. Yeah.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. And I always feel like the two books that we both wrote, well, I mean, you wrote two books, but Levers and Peak Teams are like almost complementary. We're talking a lot about the same tools and the things that you need, and all the experience that we had over the last couple of decades of like what we've seen over and over and over again. Right. And we've both seen a lot of volume of companies being in companies and helping a lot of companies. And I think it makes sense when I read your book. I was like, oh, these are the things that I believe in too. And these are like some of the most important. I kind of feel like low-hanging fruit just because I've seen it so often. I'm sure that's what you see too. And it's like you can help teams over and over again with these same tools.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the things that I really feel is important, that when I share, what is Levers about in the beginning, that I say always is, we didn't invent anything. This is just table stakes for building a business.
Right.
What we do with Levers is just say, hey, here are some frameworks you can use if you don't know how to get started figuring out X, Y, or Z. And if you have a different way to do it, fine, go do that. But these are the things that you have to do, period, if you want to build a successful business.
Right. One of the things I talk about a lot is like we're always in discovery and learning mode with teams and companies, because all the companies I work with, there's no blueprint to do what they're doing. Everyone I'm working with, if they're venture backed or not, they're doing something that's never been done before. Right. So they're not starting an electrical company where they can go and look at 12 electrical companies and say, okay, how do they do that? And I'm going to do that, maybe modify it a little bit. Every one of these companies is like trying to figure out their sales process, trying to figure out their customer, trying to figure out their product, trying to figure out customer success, right? Like everything's like a discovery. And my thought, and like what I really thought is like, I watched these companies do this discovery at all levels, and from a single team to a team of teams. And I was really like, what are the most important tools to help them discover what works, right? And I know you talk about this a lot too, like going from zero to repeatability, right? And I think that's what we're all trying to discover. And you have to do that in these companies because there isn't a blueprint. Yeah. There's no blueprint, right?
Yeah. Well, I agree. And also I think like even the example you used, like you're going to start an electric company, like there might be a blueprint, but there's also a bunch of variables. who is the team, who's the leader, what are their
Right.
expertises, what region are they in, like what's the socioeconomic environment of the place that they're like. So even though there's a blueprint, still all the same things need to get figured out, and the all those variables change the approach. So yeah, I
Right.
totally agree. 100% agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was early in my career. I kind of asked a similar question when you got done with Techstars. I kind of asked a similar question. I asked myself, and I already had Collective Genius and we were doing a lot of stuff with a lot of teams. And I asked myself, like, would I ever retire? And if I retired, what would I want to do? And it just kept on coming back to the same thing. And it was, I still would want to help teams, entrepreneurs, founders, like try to be successful. And that just seemed like something I'd want to do the rest of my life. And then I asked myself, well, what can I do to do that? And what would I want to do? And I think that's where I really turned the corner around not only providing the right people in teams at the time is what Collective Genius was, to actually like trying to get these teams to work better and be successful
Yeah.
in these like really challenging environments. And I thought, I'll just fast forward my retirement up to now and be able to start doing the stuff that I want to do. Maybe I'll do less volume when I'm retired, but it was kind of that same thing. I think you kind of sounds like you asked the same kind of question.
Yeah, yeah, like I mean, I think we're both fortunate in that we had great careers that allowed us the ability to step back and say, okay, what really brings what can we do well that also brings us joy?
Well, there's one thing that I found out earlier today when I was just doing a little research on you. We were actually competitors back in the late 90s. I was at techies.com, which was
I
one of the
remember
first
Techstars.com.
online marketplace for technology professionals.
Mhm.
And were you at Hot Jobs? Is that where you were at? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
Techies was a little bit earlier. I think I was there like 97, 90, 98, 99. And I think you were Hot Jobs-ish, kind of like,
99 to 2004
yeah,
ish. Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah,
remember techies.com because at that time there were 200 of us going
right.
at techies.com was one, I was living in San Francisco at the time. Techies.com came up all the time as a competitor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they put a lot of money into it. I mean, we almost IPO'd and then the market dumped and
Yeah.
then we pulled back and then they got rid of almost everybody. Almost, and like sold the IP. Like, I don't even know if they sold the IP. But that was the first one. I sold my business in college, coming out of college, studied entrepreneurship and finance and started a business. Sold it coming out of college because I wanted to work with these faster growing, I wanted to be around other leaders like doing really cool
Right.
things.
Yeah.
I jump into techies.com, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. We raised a ton of money
Mhm.
and we're like, basically I felt like I was drinking from the fire hose of like knowledge, and everything that I learned building my first business and learned in college around entrepreneurship seemed to like 100% flip like a different
Really?
direction in the venture world. The venture world seemed so different.
Oh, because your focus was, I'm guessing, but tell me if I'm right, like your focus was fast growth regardless of profitability, where like the stuff you built in college, you're like, okay, I can't do this if the whole point is to make money.
Right. Well, so I did a finance degree and entrepreneurship degree, and I
Uh-huh.
go between those two classes, and one would be arguing balance sheet and one would be arguing cash flow. So I already saw like the difference
Yeah,
between, big
yeah,
business and small business. I think
yeah.
the biggest thing was in college, it was business plans and writing business plans. So what I kind of realized, it wasn't about building a business plan and trying to execute to that. You actually needed like a living, breathing business plan, which I refer to as like an operating system now,
Yeah.
right? Like I couldn't just build a plan like I did when I sold the business. With the business, when I sold it, I built like a business plan. Like, here you go, take the business plan and the
Yeah.
business, and I exited it. Now, like we build that 3-year vision, we build the 1-year plan, we build OKRs every
Yeah.
90 or 180 days. We have KPIs. Like, that's living and breathing, like, especially at the speed of like knowledge and learning that we're doing in these venture backed tech companies. It feels like that can never be stagnant. It's always moving and changing. And
Yeah.
so I think that was the biggest flip when I came into that techies.com and we had raised, I don't know, like $160 million or something like that. We're running very quickly, and a business plan, if you wrote it today, would be out of date
We'll be
tomorrow.
out of date before. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have a little, maybe I don't know, funny, haha, laugh at me story about a business plan. I mean, now when I think about a business plan, it's just a financial model. That's how I think about it today, right? So go build a model, even if you don't have a business. There's your plan, and like evolve it as you go. When I left Hot Jobs, I was basically hired to start a company with this guy, Jake Weinbaum. And he was the CEO of business.com at the time. And he said, the short version is I have a URL, work.com. I have some ideas, but like go write a business plan. And if I like it, I'll fund it and we'll go. And I didn't go to business school. I didn't take any finance class. I was an English major and I didn't really know any better. So this was in 2004. So I Googled what is a business plan? And I got this, okay, here's what it looks like. And I spent, basically 3 months writing a 50-page business plan.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, there was a lot of really positive things that came out of going through that process, but not at all what he was actually asking me for. I remember I was all proud of it. I printed it out and I sent it to him and I was like, hey, let's talk about it. And he goes, tell me about it.
Well, that was probably a great exercise though. I mean, you probably got your business degree in doing that alone like that.
I think so.
Writing a business plan is not easy.
It was no joke. I mean, there were things I was like, I would not have thought to think about had I done it. I would have, and growing up in sales, I would have been like, oh, but what are we supposed to do? Here's the product. Let's just go sell it. Let's just go sell it. And then we'll figure out what to build later. And, to some degree, that's kind of still how I approach things, but maybe a little more methodical.
Well, I think that's interesting too, because I think my perspective early on in my earlier businesses, I was very in the role of sales. I was building those companies. Yeah. And then when I jumped to other companies in the .com boom, I was definitely biz dev up through sales, ended up chief of staff. And that chief of staff, that's where I started getting that bigger perspective of hey, each one of these functional areas is really important and they all need to be healthy and they healthy need to be working together. Yeah. And that's where I started having more of a view than just sales. And even when I started my first business, I did it with more of an operator, even though I'm kind of very operator mindset. But I was definitely the one out there selling and building and growing, quickly. And having that kind of holistic view changed things. And I think if you were to write a business plan back in that time, it would have made you look at all those different pieces of the business, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been, I think the reality is at least the way that I view it now, if you're really being thoughtful about building a financial model, you're also thinking about all those pieces. You're thinking about them more operationally than theoretically. So maybe there's pros and cons of that. And it's interesting because I think it's one of the reasons, it's probably the primary reason why I think for an earlier stage company, even if the CEO has zero finance experience, they should be building the financial model themselves and not forming it out, because it's that experience of having to think through the detail of the mechanics of how is this actually going to work. And so, it was kind of funny that Jake just threw it to the side and probably never opened it, but the exercise of going through it was amazing.
Right.
And to some degree, I got my MBA, I got paid to get my MBA instead of, the inverse. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best way to get it, I would say. Yeah. I'm still stuck on that. You had work.com. That's a crazy URL.
Yeah, at some point he bought work.com, business.com, and a handful of others. He is still an amazing entrepreneur, and he was very early, early mid 90s. He had an incubator and was incubating a bunch of companies, and we had, so basically work.com was in some degree, part of that incubation, although it was in the incubator that he had. But Boingo Wireless, he incubated, and business.com and a bunch of others. So yeah, he had the URL, and we tried, we made a good go at it, and ultimately decided early on, it was actually getting some traction. It's funny, I've been reflecting on the why here. Early on in it, when it was starting to get some traction, I was looking at business.com, which was flat, but significantly more revenue, but flat. And it just made sense to me, we can make more money over there faster. Why am I spending my time here?
Right.
Who knows what would have happened had I stayed. But so we merged the two together, and I ended up running sales and client services for business.com.
Now, your first book, was it Sell More Faster? Is that right?
Faster. Yeah.
It's a great title.
Yeah, it's a good title.
It's a really good title. And
Yeah.
what, I mean, you really had that sales lens, and that book was really about, what would you say?
I would say it is like an operational handbook from zero to a fully scaled sales team of what are the steps that one needs to go through in order to start with conceptualizing, like, I have a product I think I want to sell, to all of the things one would think about until you have a full team of salespeople doing their thing.
Hmm.
And it sort of reads, chronologically through that. So, like, if you're a company that has already figured out, who their customer is and their product and all that, but you're kind of stuck on commission plans, you could pick it up in the middle of it, or you can flip through it, or you can look at it chronologically depending on where you are.
Yeah. What's your thought on founder-led sales, and like, how long do you do that?
Similar to building a model, like I don't, it makes no sense to me to not have founder led sales in the beginning, because there is really no one who will care as much, for one. There's no one who has as much passion for the thing that they're solving, theoretically. There's no one who has as much knowledge, theoretically, as the founders. So it for to me, it doesn't make sense to not have founder led sales in the beginning. And the how long is a good question, because I think there's lots of variables that come into play. But let's assume, best case scenario, I would say, and I write about this in Somewhere Faster, until the point where the founder is like, okay, I can predict what's going to happen every time I go have a conversation. Let me go bring in one person and see if they can do the same thing, right? And do
Right.
that a couple of times, because that's sort of the level of the closer to the level of what everyone else is going to be like. And so just because a founder can do it does not mean anyone else can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And they have to understand what's needed and the tools that are needed. And again, that repeatability, and basically handing over that blueprint to them and say,
Yeah.
here, if you can follow this, it should work for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. This is what I read about in Somewhere Faster. And I think there's other ways to do this. This is, again, just like a blueprint for, which is founder led sales until you feel like the founder knows that what's going to happen every time. Bring in one person. When that person can, essentially match ish what the founder is doing, bring in two more people. Because now you're like, okay, if I can do it and someone else can do it, get in two more people to validate that. And in the same time that you're validating that, you're also starting to get an understanding of what are the kinds of people that we should be hiring,
Right.
so that we can get to that, and what it takes to hire those kind of people. And then you have three people, and then you just, okay, get two more. So now
Yeah.
you learn how to hire. And then once you
Right.
have those 4 or 5 people, depending on the organization, go hire 4 or 5 more and sort of double a couple of times. And all along the way, you're kind of checking in, like, just because, like, how do you, this is really important. How do you earn the right along the way to say, I've earned the right to hire 4 more people, and let me prove that those people, we understand what they're doing. They can repeat in the same way that the previous 4 or 2 people did.
Yeah. And that comes down to like metrics. And I think that's, KPIs and metrics, I think they're both important. People have strong opinions on what a KPI is and what a metric is. We don't need to get into that, but I think numbers are important. And I think if you're tracking those things, you can start to predict those things. And I think where a lot of teams, early teams that I work with, they're very scared to start tracking things because they're afraid that it's going to discourage the team, or they're going to have to send that to their investors and they're going to be wrong. And one of the things that I encourage them is to do it now. Just start doing it. And even if you think that you chose some wrong numbers, it's okay. Like, because not until you choose some number or metric based goals will you ever start to track them. And what the most important thing is that we're tracking them, because then we can start to have some sort of hypothesis or some sort of guess and understanding of what actually is working, what's not working. And I know it's not fun, especially salespeople. If you're, you figured out like, hey, you need to make 120 calls a day. And then you're going to get, 5 leads that are going to turn into this and that. 120 calls a day is not fun. And being tracked on that. And I remember going back to techies.com. I was in a pit making calls in Southern California was my territory. And I remember the guy next to me calling fax machines every once in a while just to get his call numbers up. And because they weren't tracking the calls, but like, because they could track how many calls we made, but they weren't looking at the phone numbers. Right.
Yeah.
But even I remember back then, that's a lot of stress and pressure for the team with numbers no matter what. But like, as long as I think you set the precedence with the team to say, hey, we're tracking this stuff to better understand the business. So not only that we can be successful, but you can be successful. And once we figure out these patterns, it's going to be a lot easier for us
Yeah.
to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yes. And I would say, like, if you asked the best salespeople in an organization what they're doing, they essentially are just really intuitive about the types of behaviors it takes in order to get a deal closed. What they do when they're resistant, what they often don't realize is two things. One is that they are actually very metrics driven. They're just not sharing. They're not conscious of it and sharing it, but
Right.
they know the things they need to do, and they're just recreating that over and over, and that's why they're good. They're also not being cognizant that they can have a bigger impact on the business by sharing their best practices. And when you have
Right.
poor performing salespeople that are resistant to metrics, is my opinion, is that they want to hide. They want to hide from the truth, right? And it
Right.
may be call volume, but it may not be call volume. And I think this is one of the I went to me when an organization is solely focused on call volume, and and oftentimes they're not just focused on it, but when they're only
Right.
focused on that, they're hoping, they're praying that if I make enough calls, it's a numbers game and it'll just work out. When I think a much more methodical approach, we say, okay, here are the 6 steps of the sales process. It starts with call volume, or it actually starts before that with leads that come
Yep.
in. But call volume, what are the different steps along the way that we are also measuring to get to a closed sale? Because each one of those steps is a leading indicator into the next step. And when you can understand the entire funnel, then all of a sudden it's really easy to be able to predict the
Yes.
repeatability of revenue and
Right.
growth. Yeah.
100%. I didn't think we were going to get so into sales, but you and I think we started in this area. I think those stage gates of sales are really interesting too. And this is one of the actually problems, and I don't really get into this, but I see it over and over again. And I did get it early in my business, is that when people hire early salespeople, that, it's important that you're hiring doers and not like you're going to bring in some VP because he had all this experience and he comes from a big company. But the fact that I think it's important to find someone, once you start to have 2 or 3 people, find someone that does want to lead, but they also want to sell, because someone needs to get in there and figure out those sales gates and those metrics.
Yep.
And that may not be the founder once you're starting to actually start to build that team.
Yeah. I agree with that. I actually talk about this in Somewhere Faster too. I think that the first, it's hard to say the exact number, but let's just say
Right.
somewhere between the first 2 and 6 hires are actually a different profile. I'm like, the way that I think about it is a true salesperson is just repeating a process over and over, and they like that, and that's what they're
Yep.
really good at. Those earlier people, there needs to be more curiosity, more comfort with ambiguity, and an understanding of how to consume the things that are happening, and then turn them into, find the patterns and turn them into repeatable patterns, so that when you've earned the right to hire true hardcore salespeople, you can literally just give them a playbook and say, okay, here's what you go do, and then they go do it. And if they're really, really good, they may evolve it a little bit, which is great because they've got their own
Right.
style. Those early people are a little different. I think of them more like customer development, people than salespeople.
Right. They have a layer of like understanding and developing and
Yeah, almost
creating.
like to me, like the best ones will still have great sales numbers, but the best ones are less concerned with the sale and they're more concerned with the learning. And they
Mm-hmm.
know that when they find the right person because they've learned the right thing, they will turn that into a sale, and that processes the win versus just the hunt and the kill.
Yeah, 100%. Learning is one of the 5 behaviors I talk about in peak teams. So symbiosis, communication, alignment, learning, and empowerment, I believe, are the 5 most important behaviors of all high performing teams, period. But specifically within high growth teams, you have to have those behaviors. And those behaviors don't happen naturally. You have to create the tools to actually create those behaviors. And one of those tools I talk about, metrics and KPIs.
Yeah.
Speeding forward a little bit, like in your career, how did Techstars come about for you? And you spent a lot of time and worked with tons of companies at Techstars.
Yeah. A couple hundred more. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that whole world come about for you?
Yeah, I'm happy to give you the longer version, but the short version is that there was someone else running it in Austin that founded it, was running in Austin, and I had become a mentor to the program when it first came to Austin, and an investor in the local fund. And the person who had founded it in Austin would invested personally into the company that I had just started, and it was called Joust. And ran with Joust for a few years, and ultimately that company was not successful. So when I was, technically it's still going, but that's a whole other story. When I was saying I don't see the future here and leaving,
Yes.
I went to all the investors. I wasn't the CEO of that company, but all the investors that I brought in, I went to them and I wanted to look them in the eye and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry. This isn't going to work out." And one of them was the person who was running Techstars at the time, and I sat down with him over a beer and told him that. And he said, "Great, this is going to make this conversation less awkward. I am leaving this job to do a different role inside of Techstars, and I'm thinking that you would be really good for this job." Like, great. So it worked out for everybody.
That's awesome. And what year was that you joined Techstars?
My first day was like August. It was early August 2015.
Okay.
So it'd be
So
10 years in summer. If I were still there, I left at 8.5 years, but
yeah. How many programs were there at the time?
around the world, or
Yeah, in 2015. That was early
oh,
days
in
Techstars.
2015 there were not a lot. There were, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7.
Okay. Yeah, I think I started mentoring in maybe 2016, 2017 with Ryan Brosher. Had the Techstars retail program.
Yeah.
Is when I first, got kind of pulled into that and started mentoring. And
Yeah,
still to this day, I do presentations for Techstars.
I went up and visited him in Minneapolis a few times, and I've stayed close with him and with Brett and with Sarah.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Looking back at Techstars, like that's a lot of volume of companies. Like, what were some of the biggest things that you learned that surprised you, maybe?
Oh God, the number, first of all, the quantity of learning in that period of time in my life was huge. I think some of these things were relearnings, but I think the biggest things that I learned was, one, having a strong opinion but holding it loosely was critical for me, for the companies that I was working with, for really for I think a good strategy for life personally, but certainly in business. Like, have a point of view and be open to the fact that there's lots of information that we don't have, and let's go see what we can get and get as close to proving something as we can. So that'd be one. I think I operate very much from a, like, what's the task to do? Like, go get it, just go get it done. And I think one of my learnings was, or relearnings to some degree, was people and personalities are vastly different, and the way that people are motivated, the thing that drives them, the things that get in their way are plentiful, and that it is really important to treat every human differently. There is no specific archetype that one can just follow. And the people that, the founders that I've invested in that have been most successful, like, none of them are like the next one. And a lot of them, like, I couldn't have predicted it. So I think that's those two things. There's so many learnings, but like, I can go on and go down rabbit holes. Like,
yeah.
But those are two big sort of ones that I love to carry out the rest of life.
Right. On the first one, like, I really love this idea of, I was part of an entrepreneur organization for like 10 years, and we live by, and it's a rule called Gestalt. So you're with all other founders of businesses. And one of our rules was we couldn't tell anybody what to do. That would break a rule of this
Yeah.
kind of group. And there's 14,000 members, pretty much every big city has a chapter of, a few hundred people. Then you'd
Yeah.
have your small group, but within that group, you would have to live by Gestalt, meaning you couldn't tell anybody what to do, but you could share your relevant experience. And you couldn't share someone else's relevant experience. You could only share your own relevant experience. And I take that with me in my coaching of teams that I work with. I don't tell teams what to do. Teams will ask me. I can share what I've done with other teams and what I've seen other teams do, but I don't come in and say, this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to do it, and this is who you should have to do it.
Yeah.
It's really about taking that team and helping them use a framework. I'll explain the framework, but to get to those answers without sharing. So I think, having strong opinions hold loosely, I think that's a great way to say it. Because I think interacting with different people, some people don't want to hear it. Some people want to hear it. And then you kind of have to, it's like in a good team, sometimes you don't get your way, but you still need to disagree and commit.
Yeah. Right. Well, I love the way you say that. And I think like that's the mashup of that is something that I think I believe in really strongly as well, which is, you can't, well, I'll say it this way. I think anyone who is prescriptive that they know the answers likely doesn't have a lot of experience, because the more experience you have, you realize that most of the time there's multiple answers, and most of the time the best answer is the one that the most people can rally around and be really committed to, versus someone just saying this is right because I really believe it's right.
That's so good. That's so true. That's so true. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Or, I tell people that too. I say, unless you know everything, you know nothing.
Yeah.
Because that one thing could just topple down everything else that you know, right?
You know what I like to say? I was dumb then. I'm dumber now.
That's really good. I think on the second piece that you're talking about too, like everybody's different. The more I work with teams, the more I realize that too, that everybody's different. And not only that, when you take a bunch of different people and put them in the same room together, you have a different type of environment, different type of culture, different type of team. You change.
Leader, put 4 different people around him. The leader is different by inherently.
Right. And I think one commonality I've been telling teams, because I have a lot of teams, I'll work with them and they're like, so are we your best client or are we your worst client? Or, you know what I mean? Like, and I always tell them, the one commonality across all my teams is that they're different. They're always different. Yeah. Now, I do believe that, like, again, coming back like to the 5 behaviors of high performing teams, like those are like pillars, like those don't change. And all teams could become that or strengthen each one of those, even though they're different. Right. And I think that there's specific tools that really work to help align teams around where they're going, what they need to do, how they're going to do it, who needs to do it, to help them figure that stuff out. I don't think those things change. Can we do them a little bit different? I have some teams where they struggle with something, and like, as long as that we can get to the same place with those, it's okay. Sometimes I have to change how I use the tools a little bit to help teams get there. Those things don't change. But, when you put teams together and you're a musician, like, so like we could talk about this is like, you could have a total different, guitar player, bass player, drummer, keyboard player with you as the lead person. And that's going to highly change what you sound like.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, at the end of the day, you want to create harmonies. You want to be in the same key. You want to start and end the song at the right time. Right.
Yeah. That's what I love about the 5 pillars. And I think it's similar to the 5 frameworks and levers, which is that like there are so many variables. So having something that is just universally true.
Yeah.
Right. Working together well is better than not working together well, right? If you're a sales-driven organization, having someone that understands sales is true. Knowing who your customer is important if you want to sell to the right people and not waste a lot of time and money, right? These are just universal, but the variables around that are so massive that it's important to have those, like the 5 pillars and the 5 frameworks. And
it's and I similar to you again, like I don't feel like I invented any of the elements of the tools. I feel like I discovered them, right? Like I feel like, throughout these 30 years of like working with high growth companies, it was more of like a search, discovery, trying things, them working, not working, and keep on like playing with this operating system and these tools until like I felt like, okay, I found the things that work really well
Well, you
for
were
the
doing long enough. You
majority.
like here's like that you're seeing the patterns match, and it like revealed itself to you in a way that's like, oh, so here's the patterns, and here's the way to
Yeah.
yeah.
And like, using OKRs for the last decade and seeing how key results don't work, how they wrote and measure what matters, going to people that have used them at Google and them saying they don't work that way, and figuring out like easier ways to use those tools that are just practical and make it easy for teams. It was, it was hard in the beginning going, man, I don't really want to go against what this has said. But then as I realized all the teams are failing because of these same things, it's like trying to
Yeah.
tweak these things. And then the team going, man, why don't they teach it this way? And I'm like, well, the book does a really good job of selling you on using OKRs, but like depending
Yeah.
on the team, it didn't really explain how to do them,
I,
really.
I've enjoyed this debate with a lot of people. Like I understand the place for OKRs. I I do not fundamentally believe that they are a replacement for, and I'll say KPIs, but I don't mean KPIs the acronym. I mean what KPI really means, a key performance indicator. This is telling me that. An OKR doesn't do that. An OKR
Nope.
tells you what you want to do, but it is not a measurement. By definition, it is not a measurement. And
I love that. So I think you'll appreciate this. So how I teach OKRs, the objective is what we want to do.
Yeah.
The key results, I push back and say they should actually be how we're going to achieve the objective. They don't have to be metrics. And you shouldn't think of those as KPIs. KPIs is where we want to go. I want to be 100 million ARR, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's create an objective, for in the next 90 days around sales. What do we need to do, to hit that KPI? So I like to think of OKRs are the building blocks or building capabilities within the organization, or as Elon Musk would say, the machine that builds the machine. Like OKRs build capabilities for us to hit our metrics. So maybe that's hiring salespeople, figuring out the sales process, testing a different market. That's what I think OKRs should be used for. And the key results don't have to be metric based. They could be hire 3 salespeople. It could be implement Salesforce.com. It could be, all these other things.
Which is great, but even in the name, at least my interpretation of the name, key result, right?
Yeah.
That, by definition, at least the way that I hear it, is a lagging indicator that something was or wasn't successful. A KPI is a leading indicator that you might hit the R.
Yeah.
And you know why.
Yeah. Well, I think you should have KPIs and OKRs, and they're separate.
Yeah, they can absolutely live. But there was a time, and I remember it was like my early days at Techstars, where people were trying to replace KPIs with OKRs, and it was baffling to me. I was like, by the fact that someone is making that argument, and like some pretty established people were trying to make that argument, you literally don't understand what it means to be a metrics-driven company, because you were telling me this happened. Okay, but how did you get there? Okay, I got to California. Did you fly? Did you drive? Did you take, which highway did you take? Did you stop for food? Like,
no, I fundamentally believe you're right. How I teach is you have to have KPIs. You have to have, I think KPIs and metrics, because I think some, not only are leading indicators important, but some lagging indicators are important.
For sure. Yeah.
And so I like to just call them metrics. But you have to have some, we like to define some 3-year and 1-year metrics. And then when we boil it down 90 days, we break those, let's just say it's ARR, we break that down quarterly, and we might even look at it weekly. But then we do a whole nother layer, which is about what do we need to do to actually achieve those, or build the capabilities in our organization to achieve that, which could be building the product. It could be, hiring, again, salespeople. It could be figuring out our ICP. There's a bunch of other things. How do we organize the team around those things to get those done, so we know that those will roll up to eventually get us to these numbers?
Yeah, and I know you know this, but that is literally a full chapter in Levers. It's the revenue formula chapter. It's like what are the lagging indicators that tell you that you did a good job, and then how do you get there?
Yeah. Troy and I have had this conversation. I love his financial models, and Troy Henninkopf, if you guys don't know, Math Ventures. And he wrote the book with you. He is one of the people, I believe.
Yes, he did.
But, I like to start with metrics and then build OKRs. So, because I like to think of like the metrics are kind of some goalposts that we have set. Mm-hmm. And now let's try to figure out how we can build some things that create that repeatability to hit those things. Right. And so going back to our sales conversations, it's all those type of things. So, I know we're running close on time now, and I knew this would happen with you because you and I could probably talk for
hours. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to hit real quick. You're coming out with a new album.
I'm coming out with a new album. For those of you who can't see, or I guess you can't see my background, I'm in my music studio.
Tell me a little bit of what type of music and, when the album's coming out.
You're amazing. Thank you for asking. I like to think of the genre as Gen X because it's really very cross genre. Like the first song that I'm releasing on June 6th is, I would say, like alt rock, psych rock. The second single is hip hop. And the fourth single is going to be like neo punk. And there's definitely, like, when you listen to the songs like side by side, it's clear that it's the same songwriter, right? It's clear that there's like a underlying vibe for all of it, but they're pretty different from one another.
That's so cool.
So the first single is going to drop on June 6th. The album will come out probably later this year, early next year, depending on all the things that I'm now learning, because it's just another business. All the things I'm learning about the right ways to release an album in today's day and age, with the way that Spotify works and the way the record industry works or doesn't work for you.
Well, that's awesome. I'm super excited to hear this album. And should we look under your name, or what are you coming out?
No, I'm under a band name called the Future Hippies of Punk.
Man, I couldn't like that even more. That's awesome.
It's a cool
the Future
name.
Hippies of Punk.
I tried for like 2 months to not name the band that, but just
sometimes things come to you. You can't get rid of it. That sounds like an awesome name to me. So, well, I ask this question at the end of every one of my interviews, and this will even be more fun for you. I usually stump people with this one. And takes them off guard. And so I always tell them it's good that they're sitting down for this last question, and it's more of a scenario. But here's a scenario. You're trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. You have plenty of food, water, healthcare, whatever you need, you are set for the rest of your life. But there's one thing that you don't have. There's only one thing you don't have, and that's entertainment. No entertainment on the island. But luckily for you, an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. But you can only bring one album to listen to the rest of your life. No other albums. One album. It could be of any genre or any time era. So I know I said 80s boombox, but it could be a recent or it could be old.
Yeah.
But one album, what are you going to bring?
Gosh, that is hard. I think probably to this day, I think probably Hot Rocks, the Rolling Stones double album. It's probably still to this day the album I listen to the most.
Breaking the Rules double album. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll just take this album again.
No, that's awesome. That's a great answer. Why that one?
I listened to that a lot growing up. I still listen to it a lot. There's so many, Sympathy for the Devil's on it, Brown Sugar. There's so many classic songs, and I think, I don't know, they're fantastic musicians. I think it has keep you dancing, keep you smiling. Nuts that are there.
Great answer. All right, Amos, thanks for joining me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun. I really appreciate you having me.